All right, so it's Friday, April 27th, 2018, and I'm John Dimery. I'm living in Dallas, Texas, and tonight I had a revelation, um, and something very different than what I've thought for years. Um, my life has been a pursuit of the truth and spirituality, and I'm born a Christian, abandoned that for a few years, abandoned religion altogether, spiritual belief altogether, God, all of it just seemed like nonsense. But when you put your faith in physical reality, that'll fail you faster than anything. Science proves a lot, but it just opens up more doors to more questions. So, logical person just finds themselves twiddling their thumbs at the end of the day. But if you pray for answers, you will receive them. Um, it's just how you pray and how long you pray, and understanding that the answers, they're not always what you want. Ask and you shall receive is a pretty open-ended statement. Ask and you shall receive what? You know, um, the answer may be no. So that's a realization in and of itself. Um, but we're all sons of Adam and Eve, and I think we're all still eating that fruit of knowledge, and we all still at some point are going to pursue that. If not this life, the next. Um, but for a long time, I gave up faith in Christianity completely and just saw it as an occult. And the more I learned about it, outside of the seminary teaching that I received when I was a young person, um, I started to realize that this was an occult, and that there's just these levels of privacy and secrecy, and when you have priests that tell you, they want to give you the answer, but they've taken an oath and they can't, then it makes you question why. You know, Physically, God is open for everything. You can see His creation in abundance all about you. He doesn't hide anything. I guess maybe that's not true. You got the microscopic level and the macroscopic level. So maybe you got a microscope or a telescope, but it's there for us to discover. So to find out that people hold sacred knowledge that seems to me that would be relevant in our education of spirit and God and Christianity, if that was a real thing, that why wouldn't it be wide open to us? And one of my favorite priests of all time, and I won't say his name, that I learned under, who basically indoctrinated me into the seminary process and told me from the get-go he could see them, in my eyes and my personality and my voice, that he felt like I was supposed to be a priest, and I always felt like I was too, and I was very disappointed when I was kicked out of seminary, and began a process of abandoning faith, if you will, or belief in anything that wasn't something I could see, touch, or feel. And through that process, began to meditate and discovered something new. And then I started studying Buddhism, and I started realizing that the more I learned about it, the more I seemed more aware of what it was that he was trying to teach than even a lot of people who profess to be Buddhists. And the belief system in and of itself was so simple, and that it was the idea that, that we are this creature that's just such a tiny part of what God is, that it really takes an extreme amount of effort to begin to understand that. And what I began to understand through Buddhism was that Christ and the teachings of Christ were very Buddhistic, and also very yogic. I took some time to to study Hinduism. I didn't get as deep into Hinduism, but I, unlike a lot of other people, I do understand the demigods, the deities. Even in Christianity, I think a lot of people say, "Oh, don't worship a false god," and I think people misunderstand what people are doing in Hinduism as an idea of worship. I think they misunderstand the definition of prayer and what prayer really means, and the difference between prayer or conversation with spirit and worship. Worship is literally means to work for. So, to worship God, we all work for God. We are God's experience. But, one of the Hindu or, other, whether they're Greek or Roman gods or whatever, I mean, these beings all had specific and clear explanations of who and what they were and what their purposes were. And the more I began to study all of it, the more I started to realize that these deep connections to man and to time and to place, and that they were as real as the physicality around me, even maybe more so. People don't write with the depth of conviction that the Greeks and Romans wrote with about their gods. And yet we just dismiss them as some kind of a falsehood or possible demon, because anything that we as Christians can't explain is a demon. But in fact, demon would mean to be below, the mound, to be below. And all of us are below the Creator. All of us are below God. So I guess we're all demons, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, none of us are worthy to be in His presence. So it becomes kind of confusing, but kind of revealing all at the same time when you really start to look at the bigger picture and put them all together. And it was through Buddhism, though, that I began to understand karma. And it was through karma that I truly began to understand Christ. And the more I learned about Judaism, about Old Testament, about, the basis of Christianity, the more I began to feel disheartened about Christianity, let alone Judaism. Judaism's even more so an occult of, the Noah's at the top and everybody else is below, and it's not an open book. And Christianity is full of plenty of rituals, and Judaism's got even more. Of course, Catholicism has 7 rites. I think it's 7 that we practice, and rite being ritual, and yet most other Christianities look at ritual and think of it again as something satanic or demonic, but it's really not. I started to figure out that ritual is a way of communicating with God and with Spirit. And I think what people fail to realize is those demigods that are, written about with Hinduism and, and somewhat even with Buddhism and other ancient Eastern religions, is that these beings are subservient to the Creator. And they're just a means of production. Much like, you want to build a building, you don't just build the building yourself. Oh, I have a great idea for a building. I think I'll build the whole damn thing myself. No, you hire contractors. You get somebody who's going to lay the foundation, but before that, you got to have somebody who does the plumbing and all the sewage, and before that, there's got to be somebody running the electrical out. And so there's a teamwork, and the person at the top doesn't do it all, and even if he could, I think he would, if he was a decent person, which God created us in His image, then He would want to give that work to others, to give them meaning, to give them purpose. And so He does it in a physical realm. It is above as it is below, so why wouldn't He do it in a spiritual realm too? I also find it very ironic that as Christians we have no problem with believing in angels. And have no doubt, you will never be an angel, at least not in my belief system. Angels are angels. They are soldiers of God. They were made and created that way, and they are different than us in many ways. And the more I've learned about angels, the more I understand it. And it's basically like spiritual soldiers. Thus the reason for the idea of demons and the demonic realm and Satan and all that. But, even those things have their purpose and, again, aren't to be judged. I think, it's a real simple thing to say, something evil or there's a demon or they're possessed or whatever. Not to say that that can't be a real thing, but that's not going to work. I mean, think about it. Do you really think you're going to get to the gates of heaven and say, the devil made me do it? The devil made me do it. If it's St. Peter waiting there, as Catholics believe, I just think he's going to smile and go, go on in. But I don't think he's going to buy that as an excuse. Not to say that you can't be tempted, and not to say that the demonic realm can't tempt you. For even Scripture tells us that, this realm is Satan's. This third dimension that we live in is Satan's realm. This space belongs to the creatures of what we call the demonic realm. That's why all the creatures here have horns and teeth, and they gnash and they attack, and they have no guilt. They do what they do. A tiger kills a wildebeest. He doesn't go, God, I feel really bad about that. But they do seem to have some association with pack dynamic and that kind of thing. So, but I digress. We live in the third dimension. We're not allowed to even judge this. This is God's creation, and by judging this, you demean it, which basically means when you say, oh, this world's going to hell and it's not worthy, you're saying God's creation's not worthy. Good luck with that. Now let's see you check into the gates of heaven, if those gates are there for you, and you try and pass that one by. I think the devil made me do it might get you through quicker than that was a shithole that I just came from. And there's too much of that going on in this world. I can't believe anybody who has a child can think that having hopelessness in this world is an acceptable thing. Are we living in a hard time? Are we living in the end times? The end of this time. Yes, this is the end of the age of Pisces. We are going into the age of Aquarius. This is the end of an age. It's the end of this time. And there is going to be some shit hit the fan. You better believe that. There's got to be a cleansing. We're also rolling from, the Silver Age into the Iron Age. And now we're rolling right back into the Golden Age. And the Golden Age is when man moves giant stones and creates massive pyramids with just his simple thoughts, with the words out of his mouth. And that is man being in constant commune with God, the unveiling, the apocalypse, the apocalypto, to unveil. So God unveils himself to us. So, temples aren't necessary anymore. It's just a place where God will be present. So I think within the next 50 years, 2012 to whenever the next 50 years runs through, we won't know the time, but, I think there will be a lot of things that will unfold before then. But we shouldn't lose hope. I mean, if anything, we should have hope. And the people who are being born now are the people who will take us into that age. And those are the people God created for this age. So you be careful about judgment, for judgment is God's alone. And understand that these kids that are being born now, my kids, your kids, these are the kids that are going to take us into that new age. And God's going to cleanse this planet of everything else. Now these kids, some of these kids are kids that have been here before. Some of this is reincarnation, not all of it, but a good portion of it. And so it's their second chance or third chance or 10,000th chance, who knows. But this is the time they'll prove themselves. And why do I know this? Because God doesn't fail. And that's what I think as humans, our failure is to believe that he fails. And not that he is a fitting term either. That thee fails, that God isn't a fitting term either. The creator, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't make mistakes. We're not a mistake. We're not an experiment. There is no such thing as time in the spiritual dimension. So the idea of an experiment, which I've heard so many of my New Age friends say, doesn't work. Because if you're the ultimate scientist, you may be able to recreate physicality and reality and humanity or whatever kind of life you want to a bazillion times over in a trillion different stars. But you're not making mistakes, because time is irrelevant. So therefore, everything is done perfectly. And there's more perfection in this universe than there is flaw. So it's kind of like the Christians do say, just giving into faith and knowing that it's beyond you. You're going to go down this path. You're going to swim down this river with the rest of us. And at the end, we're all going to dump out into the ocean, and there we go, So here's my point tonight, to the idea of letting go of the things that we think our belief is. Anything that's negative. I don't care what religion you believe in, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, anything that involves not just judgment of another human, but judgment of anything, judgment of a demon. You are not allowed. Christ himself, after walking on water and, telling the whole ocean and sky to be quiet and stunning his disciples, got out and walked on the water. And he didn't say, walk on the water because I will allow it. He said, walk on the water because you can do it. He, with the faith of a mustard seed, can move a mountain. So he's really indicating the potential for man there, and the potential for faith and belief, and more as as New Age types would say, being in flow and just accepting what's happening. Some bizarre things have happened in the past few days. I picked up my daughter on Thursday, Wednesday, had I not let my ego get in the way. I needed to go to the hardware store, but I had to go get her first at 4 o'clock, and I asked her if she'd go with me. She'd been with me 100 times. 9 out of 10 times she would have said, sure, let's go. She didn't. She said she really just wanted to go home, and I was like, all right. And rather than argue, I just thought, what difference does it make? Drop her off at the house and then go to the hardware store. And so I dropped her off. And then by the time I got there, I decided to go in for a second, say hello to my wife. And so I spent about 10 minutes there. I wish my wife wasn't there yet, but I still spent about 10 minutes. Won't say what, just took me 10 minutes before I got out of there. And I went on over to the hardware store. But had she went with me, I would have left her at the hardware store inside to go use the restroom. She would have been by herself. And during that period, those few minutes, we're talking literally about 10 minutes that made the difference. When I pulled in the hardware store 10 minutes later than I would have, the place was being swarmed with police. And I found out within minutes that I was in the hub of a beehive, and that there was a man who had shot somebody in the store, a security person who I'd only spoken to just 2 days before, after a man's Suburban got stolen out of that same store. And I'm wondering, even now, the man whose Suburban got stolen, the guy that he described sounds a lot like the guy who shot the security person and also shot 2 police officers. One of them died later. And it didn't hit me till a day or two later that, had I just not let my daughter go home, I would have definitely been right in the middle of that store. Not to say that anything would have happened to me, but I'm a stupid person who likes to play the hero role because I believe in God's path, and I'm always like, nothing's going to happen to me. I'll jump in that burning vehicle. Nothing's going to hurt me. And it's not that I'm trying to be a hero. It's like I'm trying to test God, which also may not be the smartest thing. But I just stayed in flow, and I took my daughter home because that's what she asked. And had I not, I definitely would have been in that store. And I don't know, it makes you think. Today, we put we let somebody come in and view the home, and for a private buy on our house because we're thinking about hitting the road. And this gentleman made an offer right away, and so I'm considering that offer. And but we've spent a lot of time restoring this house, particularly me, in the past few months. And so this was something that's really coming, to a head. And so tonight I went out to give God some thanks, just, for the confirmation, if nothing else. The apparent um, immediate happiness in this guy's eye when he saw the property, and he didn't even question the price, or he just said, "Oh yeah, I'll take it." And it makes you question a lot of things, like selling it too low, but I won't get into all that. Anyway, I wanted to give thanks to the Father, and the most sacred way to give thanks, not just through prayer. It's not just kneeling down and saying thank you. It's physically doing something, and that doesn't mean going out and helping another. There is actually physically something you can do that gives greater thanks to God than anything else, and it's been passed on through time. I don't know if the Sumerians did it, but the Egyptians definitely did. The Romans did. The Greeks did. The Hebrews, Catholics, they all do it. They don't explain it, but I'm going to tell you, here it is. It is the burning of a sacrifice, which an ancient, well, not even ancient, current Judaistic practice, they would call that Holocaust. And yes, because it's a burning of something you're sacrificing, and it can be an animal. Not so much anymore. Christians aren't supposed to burn animals. Christ told us that's done. God doesn't want that anymore. But in the old days, that's what they did. They brought animal sacrifice to the temple, but not always. Oftentimes, the temple needed other things too. These could have been gifts of gold, or other types of gift, food. And often flesh. The flesh was often burnt, thus called Holocaust. But a lot of times those burning practices also had something to do with, keeping it fresh, basically, or keeping it to the point where it was edible for a longer period of time. Some sacrifices were burnt right to a crisp, but others might have been shared with God. But that's Holocaust, and that's something you can learn about if you want to get into it. I digress. Anyway, the most sacred, though, from what I've learned, and the earliest I know of was the Egyptians, but it might have went back before that, was frankincense, and became even more popular with the Romans after conquering Egypt, Julius Caesar, all that kind of crap. And the reason being was because this was a gift that you could tribute to your god or gods or whatever. And multiple religions, not just the Jews, gave burnt sacrifices. But a sacrifice of coins, say gold or silver coins, left on an altar, or even in a hot fire, sooner or later, the cauldron or whatever the mound they would have given the sacrifice on, would have been cleared out of the ash. So, and people didn't throw coins in anyway. It wasn't like a wishing well. They would have laid them on the side, or and everybody knew that God wasn't literally picking up the coins. They knew the priest picked up the coins. Just as they knew the priest pretty much picked everything else up. And especially in Roman society, I think it became kind of an issue of, really who receives this sacrifice. Is it really our gods that receive it, or is it just the priests in their temple? And thus, is it going to its highest potential? So, you can't exactly burn a gift of gold, and even the burnt offerings of, dove or lamb or whatever, as humans, they would have been humans just like us. You got to just go, where does it really turn up? Where's it all really going? Is it just going in the priest's mouth or in the priest's pocket? Probably. But they quickly started to appreciate a particular gift. Gifts of essence started to really be offered, and because the idea of prayer and of the spiritual realm being a gas place, the ether, as it said, so you start to think of these smoke offerings, basically, and people related to them just as we do now, an offering that lets smoke go up into the air, whether it be incense or something else. So they would offer different things, and eventually, somebody came across these offerings of sap. Many of the offerings they gave were sap offerings from the sap of trees, and the the sap of the frankincense, which comes, as I understand it, from a tree in that's the Saharas of Africa. The tree looks like it's dead most of the time, and the water comes, it springs out for a little bit. But the Saharan Africans will take a knife and cut near the root of the tree, and it will ooze this golden sap out. So there's just so many things about it. I mean, this tree oozes a sap, one that's gold. Now, most saps do have a gold tint to them, but this one is as gold gets. And when it's burnt, the smell is so good. I mean, there's just something so pleasing and calming and just beautiful about it. If you've never had truly smelt, and I'm not talking about an incense stick, I'm talking about pure frankincense sap, which you can buy online, burn it over a coal, and it will release an essence that just will amaze you. I don't think there's anything on the world like it. But it was also very hard to get. Oftentimes, and most of the time, most Roman history, they say it was more valuable than gold per weight. And it's not very heavy, so you can imagine a huge bundle of this, still being worth more than gold. And it was an offering that when gave, you knew that you were giving something that was worth more than gold. It weren't more than laying down those gold coins. And when you laid it down, or when you added it to the offering fires of the temple, it was gone. And the people that might have been there to smell it would have only been there for a moment. But the true essence of it went up, and it was given up to the gods. And so it wasn't about your own enjoyment or your own pleasure. It was about you giving of something, just as a animal sacrifice was about giving of something that actually meant something, that wasn't just you throwing out from your surplus, but giving of the best, or as Christ would say, the poor woman who gave her last penny gave more than all the rich men in the whole temple. And, that's why they sacrificed the most pure, most white, most precious lamb. The young lamb was a pure sacrifice. Didn't go for the old buck or something like that. They went for the young lamb. And the reason being was because, especially the young male lambs, that was something that was going to grow up and create more wealth and more life for the person who owned it, who owned that flock. So to sacrifice that animal was showing true faith in God, that you knew that He would provide more, and if He didn't, then that was your fate. And then either way, it was what God had chosen for you. So it was a true test of faith, just as Abraham's almost sacrifice of his son was, God truly tested him. What will you give up for me? So animal sacrifice, into sacrifices of wealth. And so, which brings us to, current ritual practices even within the church. The Catholic Church burns a combination of essence which they do not release, but I can tell you exactly, I think exactly what it is, but I'm not sure, to be honest. But I'm almost positive it's a mix of frankincense and, of course, myrrh, which is something that's used for a lot of things, embalming and healing and medicines and whatever. I'll tell you this: don't ever boil it unless you want to go right to sleep for about 2 hours. But the last one is something called dragon's blood, which is also a tree sap. It also goes under a lot of different other names, so don't let that word dragon, throw you. Of course, then again, not that the Catholic Church might have used a different name for it either, but they keep it kind of secret for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe they're throwing the ashes of St. Peter in there or something. I have no freaking idea, but if you put those three together, you will have the essence that you were probably raised with, that you smell in the Catholic Church when they're doing a funeral or a wedding, and they bless it with the smoke. That is a ritual, and they're giving an essence. They're burning an essence in order to open up the spiritual realm, in order to awaken the spiritual realm to the fact. And that's what ritual does. It says to the spiritual realm that you're acting in such a manner that you want to connect, that you want to make that connection. You think about a computer, you can't just, open it up and just whatever you think happens, whatever you pray for happens. No, you have to physically make a process to find what you want to find. And it's very much the same with the spiritual realm. You have to proceed with a ritual, and these rituals are not designed by man, they're designed by God, and God gives them to man through different processes. But the burning of essences is the current ritual for Holocaust, instead of the burning of a animal or other life. But so for years, I had a priest. Now we go back to the beginning of what I was talking about, a priest that I had written a paper in seminary that I think made this same priest kind of aware that I was a little bit more in tune maybe than some other people. I thought outside the box. And I was talking about Judas and about how Judas can't be judged, that judgment isn't ours, and that for us to assume that he went to hell is just bizarre, because without him, prophecy would not have been fulfilled. And the proof of Christ, if you believe Christ is God, then you have to understand that Christ became God only through, sorry, my wife just walked in. So I'm making a little recording. You have to understand that Christ became God only through the subtle proof of prophecy, not through him coming down on a cloud with a sword, but through the slightest little sayings, through the most subtle manners did he prove himself as God. And in very much the same way, the idea of frankincense and myrrh and gold being given as his gifts. A priest hinted to me years ago that the truth was in the Bible when you want to know about what happened to Christ during the missing years. And the idea that the church of all, that the Vatican, with all of its enormous libraries of knowledge that go well beyond the ideas of Christianity and that kind of stuff, doesn't know is ridiculous. So the real question is, why don't they want to tell us? And he hinted to it, but said he was under oath and he would never reveal what he knew. But he told me I was on the right path and that it was there in Scripture for all to see. And so I finally figured out that, at the beginning of Christ's life, there was the three men that came from the east, and they followed a star, which wasn't really a star. It was an alignment of a planet and a star, which looked like a star, a bright star. It was Venus and the North Star, whatever. I don't know. You look it up yourself, but it would make sense. Venus is Mary, Mother Mary, all that. Water. But he said it was there to be seen at Christ's childhood. So, I thought about the gifts that were given, frankincense and myrrh, and I thought, oh, well, they're teaching him these symbolic rituals. And then it hit me, oh, that's it. He went to the East and he learned these Eastern religions, and they don't want us to know that that's where Christ went and learned all this. And then tonight, while I was doing a ritual of frankincense, God revealed to me that I was wrong. And I've been telling people this dumb crap for probably 10 years, that, Christ learned all this through the Eastern religions. But if you read a little further, they do a census and Christ gets separated from both of his parents, and a Roman census, because, those Romans like their taxes. So, and everybody has to go back to their homeland so they can count them all up. And during that census, Christ becomes separated, and they have to travel back to the town that they were living in to find out that he's teaching the scholars. Now that's the last we hear of him. And he says, "Didn't you know I would be about my Father's business?" And God was revealing to me during that ritual that I was wrong, that he didn't go there to learn, that the gold wasn't given so that he could go there and learn from them, because that's what happened with the gold, without a doubt. It was a travel expense. But he was showing me this massive bright star in the sky, or this alignment of a star and a planet. And he was showing me that these men followed this because they knew that this was where God would descend. And that in fact, the gold was given because they wanted to learn from him the same way that when he was at age 12, that the teachers, the rabbis, were learning from him at age 12 in the temple. He was already teaching. He didn't need to be taught anything. He was teaching. Scripture clearly states that he wasn't there to learn. He was there teaching them. Didn't you know I'd be about my Father's business? And in the same way, these wise men, these magi from the east, were requesting the same thing. They didn't bring him gold so that he could come back and learn from them. They brought him gold so that he would have, they were providing him a gift to make sure that he could come and teach them his ways, the ways of God. And at the same time, they brought him frankincense because they weren't teaching him about a ritual. He is God, and the greatest essence that can be given to God is frankincense. And the only thing that was given to him symbolically was the myrrh. And even that wasn't myrrh, because the myrrh would have been used in his, when they would have dressed the body before they put it in the tomb, which that tomb would have been a temporary place anyway. But they would have used different oils and so on the body to help the body prepare for the next stage of mummification. But so they would have also known that he was going to be given as a sacrifice. So they brought him frankincense because they knew he was God. They brought him myrrh because they knew he would sacrifice himself. And they brought him gold because they wanted to learn his lessons. And there's the truth, I think. And ask me again in another 10 years, and maybe I'll tell you something different. But anyway, love you all.